Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to have a house full on a weekday like this, and obviously this is a topic of great interest to everybody. RTI Act has been one of the most far-reaching acts which has put a lot of power in the hands of the citizens, and there has been a lot of consternation about the recent amendments that have been announced. There has been also a lot of concern that this act has not been adequately discussed. It was introduced in the previous session and had to be shelved because there was so much opposition from many RTI activists. This time around it was passed very quickly and barely within a week. So we want to discuss some of the issues surrounding it. The idea is for all of you to understand what it means to us, and the experts are going to sort of decipher that for us. What does it mean to citizens? What does it mean to independence and autonomy? And does it detract in any way from the power that was intended to be given to the citizens for better transparency and governance? So we have a great panel. And thank you, BIC, for facilitating this. So with that, we will start off. Alok, I think we will start with you. Maybe you can take the audience through a quick snapshot of what the RTI bill was and what does the amendment do.
Okay. Thanks, Revathy, and good evening, everyone. Let me just take 5 minutes to take you through this bill. It's actually a very short bill. The amendment bill is a very short bill, but there are 3 things that I think we need to keep in mind. The first thing that I want to mention is the fact that what was earlier provided in the RTI Act itself has now been delegated to the central government to provide. And what are these things that the central government will now decide? It's actually 2 specific things. One is what will be the tenure of the Central Information Commissioners and the State Information Commissioners. For those of you who are not aware, as it stands, like before the amendment, the Central Information Commissioner, like as part of the Central Information Commission, the Chief Information Commissioners and the State Information Commissioners were appointed for a period of 5 years or till they reach the age of 65. Now what the bill says is their length of tenure, whether it be 5, whether they'll retire at 65, this will be as per rules made by the government. The rules haven't been made public yet, so we don't know what the change is going to lead to. The second thing that they have changed is the salaries and the terms and conditions of service. Earlier, before amendment, this was linked to the salaries and status of the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners. Now, you may be aware that the Chief Election Commissioner's post is protected constitutionally. They have their salary and staff is fixed under the Constitution in accordance with the procedure laid out in the Constitution. It can only be changed by that. And the earlier RTI Act said they will enjoy the same status, they will have the same pay and terms and conditions as enjoyed by the Chief Election Commissioner and the Commissioners. Now what the amendment says is that this will be determined by the central government. So the central government will frame rules to do these 2 big things. One, which is to say how long you will appoint an information commissioner for, and what will be the terms and conditions of service, including salary, including allowances, including so on and so forth. But that's not all. Now, we have to keep 2 other things in mind. The second point that I sort of wanted to make is that the change does not govern removal. So, removal of the Chief Information Commissioners and the various Information Commissioners is still governed by statute, which means that they still have to follow the procedure, which is you have to conduct an inquiry headed by a Supreme Court judge, and then when they find some sort of misconduct, then they can be removed. So if the government does frame rules, they can't say we will also prescribe how the removal will take place. That is still provided for under the RTI Act. A third point, and this is something which the crux of the debate is really going around, is on changes to the terms and conditions of service. Suppose, one school of thought holds that these changes allow for more control of the information commissioners, that they could retaliate. Suppose an information commissioner passes an order that the government doesn't like, the government could retaliate by amending the rules to reduce their pay or shorten their term and so on. There is one proviso which was in the earlier RTI Act and has been retained in this amendment, which says that you can't make a change to the terms and conditions which is disadvantageous to the Information Commissioner. Now, this is a provision which is also there in our Constitution. It applies to Supreme Court judges also, it applies to the election commissioners also, to basically say that you can't, midway through someone's tenure, change their terms and conditions of service to their disadvantage. So, supposing somebody 2 years into their tenure, the government cannot change their salary from, say, 1 lakh to 50,000 just because it's unhappy with the way a Information Commission is working. So this particular protection, which was available under the previous RTI Amendment Act, also continues to the new under the amendment bill. Final point, this is only prospective. So all the Information Commissioners who have so far been appointed, all of them who are currently in office, whether at the center and the state level, they are not affected by this particular amendment. They are going to continue their service in accordance with the earlier law. So the earlier law said you will retire at 65, you will enjoy the perks and benefits of an election commissioner. They are going to continue to enjoy those until their term ends, until they hit the age of 65 or they complete 5 years. It will only be for subsequent appointments. So those who are appointed in the future as Information Commissioners both at the center and the state level, they will be the ones who will be governed by the rules made under this Act. Again, keep in mind, we don't know the rules yet. The draft of the rules have not been made public. Now, just very quickly, within the bill itself, a statement of objects and reasons has been attached. Now, to me, usually a statement of objects and reasons is the government saying why we need this law, why it's a good thing and so on. To me, this statement of objects and reasons does not make any sense. The reasons provided in the statement of objects and reasons has no bearing to the text of the legislation. They say that the election commission, there was an anomaly that there's an election, that the Information Commission commissioners enjoyed the same status as the election commission. That's not an anomaly, that was the intention of Parliament. Remember, this bill was passed almost unanimously, if not actually unanimously, in 2005 in both houses of Parliament. So you had every legislator knowing exactly what they wanted to do when the bill said they will enjoy the same status. And the reason for that is also provided. If you go back and see the debates for the 2005 Act, there also Parliament and the government say, we want Information Commissioners to enjoy the same status, right? At least in terms of pay, allowances and so on, as election commissioners. So this was clearly the intent. There is no anomaly. Obviously they do different things. Clearly even that Parliament knew that the Election Commission and Information Commission do different things. But they understood the importance of the Information Commission and gave it that status. So, just to one concluding note is that yes, they have made these changes, but if you read the bill, it is not clear why they have made these changes. So, which is sort of what I thought I'd give like a broad overview of the law.
Thank you, Alok. We'll next move to Jayna. We'll next move to Jayna. Jayna, two of the former CICs have come out very strongly regarding the status of this Information Commissioners. Is RTI a constitutional right? Are the Information Commissioners going to enjoy a constitutional status? So there's been a lot of debate on that, and that's, can you just throw some light on it?
Thank you, Veeresh.
Okay, what do you think?
Okay, thank you. So, thanks Alok for outlining what the amendments were. And it's not here at all. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So thanks Alok for outlining the amendment. And you know, Revathy, if you're asking for the constitutional perspective on these amendments, I think what is important is that, first let's look at what the RTI Act actually stated in its unamended state. And why was there a comparison to the Election Commission, first of all, if we look at the unamended RTI Act, what it stated is that the salaries and allowances payable to and other terms and conditions of service of the Chief Information Officer or the CIC shall be the same as that of the Chief Election Commissioner. And the same goes for the State Information Commissioner, that it will be comparable to the Election Commissioner. So in fact, the RTI Act, in the statute, in fact, gave that comparison. Now in the amendment, what the amendment states is that this section shall be removed and it shall be substituted by saying that the terms and conditions will be as defined by the central government. So the entire comparison to the Chief Election Commissioner, which was in the statute, has been removed. And of course, the 5-year term, there was a fixed tenure of 5 years. This fixed tenure also has been removed, and now the amendment states that it will be as determined by the central government. Now, if we are to explore the constitutional perspectives of this, what is the justification given? Alok did mention a little bit, but I would actually like to read out what the justification given by in this amendment is. The justification given is that the Election Commissioner is a constitutional body, and the Chief Information Commissioner under the RTI Act is not a constitutional body, and therefore this comparison shouldn't be made, and therefore we are making the amendment. May I just read it out? What the Statement of Objects and Reasons states: the functions being carried out by the Election Commission of India and the Central and State Information Commissions are totally different. The Election Commission is a constitutional body established by Clause 1 of Article 324 of the Constitution and is responsible for the superintendence, direction and control and preparation of the electoral rolls and conduct of elections of Parliament, etc., etc. On the other hand, the Central Information Commission and the State Information Commissions are statutory bodies established by the provisions of the RTI Act, and the mandate of both are different, and therefore these their status and service conditions need not be comparable. So that is the justification given. Now here let's look at this justification and see whether this justification is really something that sounds plausible. And if you look at the constitutional perspective, I mean I'll go into my reasons, but I would clearly say that this amendment is completely unconstitutional. And I will give my reasons for saying that. First of all, the justification given that the Election Commissioner is a constitutional body and the RTI commissioners, both the chief and the state commissioners, are not constitutional bodies, and therefore their salaries and tenure cannot be compared. This argument itself, I would argue, is a fallacious argument, and it's not a strong argument at all. I wouldn't argue that the RTI Commissioner or the Chief Information Commissioner is a constitutional body. It's not. The Information Commissioners are set up under a statute, under the RTI Act. But what was the purpose of putting the fact that they have a fixed tenure of 5 years or having their salaries compared to a high position of an authority like the Chief Election Commissioner was to protect their independence and their functioning. The fixed tenure, if we see, why was a fixed tenure given? Whatever the fixed tenure be, a fixed tenure of 5 years was given. And the fixed tenure was given specifically to ensure that Chief Information Commissioners or the State Information Commissioners would be able to carry out their duties without any fear that they may be removed at any time, or that their tenure would be under threat. And so was their salary protection, that their salary was in fact compared to a high constitutional body like the Election Commissioner to give the emphasis that they are doing the role that is extremely important in a democracy. And why was the RTI Act, and here I want to go a little bit into why some of these things become very important to protect their independence. And it goes to the root of freedom of information laws in any democracy and in a constitutional framework. The RTI Act, the Right to Information Act, was enacted after a great demand and activism. There was a history of activism which led, and a movement which led to the RTI Act being enacted. And it was to ensure that there is freedom of information, citizens have access to complete information of the government and public bodies, that this puts a check and accountability on the government and state institutions, and really is a check on corruption. And if we want to keep this check on corruption and accountability on public institutions and bodies, then the authorities manning these institutions have to have that independence that they, and the guarantee of tenure and pay, that they are not going to be shunted if they were to take a decision which would be difficult for the public authority. The information asked often are, in fact, when the RTI Act was enacted, and when the initial information applications were made, and where they led to corruption, immediately, if you speak to a lot of the RTI activists who initially started making RTI applications, they would tell you that the minute you ask for the information, the work would be done, right? Because when you ask for information, say you ask for information on a contract and the actual work is not done, and the information officer knows that he or she has to respond, they would do the work and respond, right? Because the response given by them, if the work is not done, or if the money is not utilized, or if the money is utilized in a different manner, is a weapon in the hand of the citizen to actually demand accountability. And it was to ensure that public information officers would be able to do their job without any fear of their tenure being affected, that there was security of tenure and a fixed period of 5 years was given. And really that is the place of freedom of information laws like the RTI Act in a democracy. There have been decisions that, not just on, we have a constitutional right of freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, and this has been, declared by the Supreme Court to say that this does not include just freedom of speech and expression, but freedom of information and the right to information. So the right to information is a constitutional right, and if we want to ensure that our right to information in a democracy is protected and guaranteed, then there has to be the same guarantee and independence given to authorities which are going to be manning and implementing that right. So really it was with that context, but I just want to take a minute or two more. There are many other statutes which have important accountability measures, like the Lokayukta or the Lokpal or the NHRC, the National Human Rights Commission, or the CVC, the Central Vigilance Commission, who all have their tenures and salaries compared or equal to constitutional bodies, even though they are not constitutional bodies. So the CVC chairperson's salaries are equal to the UPSC chairperson, and the UPSC is a constitutional body. Or the NHRC chairpersons have their salaries and tenure salaries comparable to Supreme Court judges, which are constitutional authorities. And so you don't have to, RTI commissioners don't have to be a constitutional body. But if their salaries are comparable or their tenure is comparable, that doesn't deserve any amendment. None of those statutes are amended, or those other authorities, their tenures are affected. So the question really now is that why now after 15 years? For 15 years the RTI Act was functioning without any constitutional irregularities. And so therefore why now this amendment?
So thanks Jayna. Vivek, we will move on to you.
Yes.
What we want to really know is this, there are 2-3 things that bother everybody. Was this done in haste? I mentioned that it was taken up at the previous session and Parliament session, and it didn't go through, and there was a lot of objection. What was the reason to take this in a hurry and not have enough public consultation on it, or explain in detail? I mean, both the speakers have explained that the reasons that have been articulated in this don't really respond to the objectives of the RTI Act. If you can tell us in what way the RTI Act is supposed to put power in the hands of the citizens so we can demand better accountability and transparency. Through this amendment, how will transparency be improved or accountability be improved? And what was the purpose for this, and why was this done in a hurry?
Yes. I hope you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you, Revathy. Thank you for Alok and Jayna on their insight. of the Act. I think when we look at this Act, you were talking about the reasons given by Alok and Jayna. Yes, they have given reasons to say why this amendment may be falling short of the constitutional standards. This is the argument brought by them. Now look at the reason. I'd just like to analyze the reasons. And before analyzing those reasons, I'd like to give you an overall picture of the architecture of the Act. Because unless we understand the architecture of the Act, we won't be able to understand what really this amendment has done. So that is important. Now if you look at the RTI Act, now since this amendment has come forth, many of critics have been hitting at the salary and allowance part. You know, the RTI Act is not about salary and allowance part, let me tell you. The RTI Act is about various other provisions which are very transformative and which answer the activism that was there in 2005 and which activism led to the Act. And the important aspects which I would like to bring to your consideration in this debate, the most important and controlling features of the Act, apart from the salaries and allowances, have been left untouched. Now, if these features are left untouched, the RTI Act stands on certain pillars in its architecture. What are those pillars? Section 4 says, the government must maintain records of information, which is very elementary. If it does not maintain the record in a ready-handed state.
Please hold up the mic.
Okay. If it does not maintain, the architecture of the Act is that the government must maintain the record of information under Section 4. Why has it got to maintain the record of information so that it is readily available to citizens? This is one. Section 6, which says applications are to be filed by any citizen of India, and that applications will be dealt with in a certain manner. There is a protocol, and the protocol says it has to go to the public information officer of a department. The public information officer decides in 30 days. If he does not decide, it is deemed to be rejected. And this aspect also is left untouched. And this controls, look at the 30-day limit, it controls the flow of information. He has either to give it, or he has to refer to the appellate authorities, or he is deemed to have rejected and he is liable for a penalty by the next appellate authority. So here also we have the Act working on an autonomous mechanism from the very inception. Now the third is under section 8, which provides for appeals. 8 provides for the appeals. They will have to file appeals to the various authorities. The appellate authority will have to be indicated, and appellate authority will have to take decision. Now what I'd like to bring to your consideration is a summary of 4, 6, 7 and 8. A summary of all these would show that this is the architecture of the substance and the meat of the Act. And if these provisions are left untouched by the government, and they have said that the bill does not touch them, there is no intrusion into this original Act as was existing in 2005. So here we have that when we were asked to address the reasons, here we have that the substance of the Act is left untouched. Now there is a second part to the substance also of that, and that is how a CIC is appointed and how a CIC is removed. A CIC is appointed under Section 12, and his mode of appointment is he is appointed by a committee consisting of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition. A committee consisting of these two persons. Even the mode of appointment is left untouched as was originally contemplated in 2005. Again, the removal, which you come under Section 14. Under removal, this clause is very important. Under removal, assuming, this is the question I ask everyone, even in panel discussions, assuming he gets a salary equivalent to the Supreme Court judge, or assuming a Supreme Court judge's salary today is a whopping 2,80,000. Let us consider that. The amount of burden on the taxpayers' money, if we are going to put that money onto the Information Commission. In the proposed amendment, in the 2018 amendment. Now, the question is, if we are looking at this huge salaries, assuming an information commissioner is appointed for a salary of 90,000, central government frames rules. Now the power is given to the central government. Central government frames rules. There is a structured rule which says all central information commissioners get so and so salary, state information commissioners get so and so salary. So they rationalize in terms of the rules, with the rules, and control the salaries. Is the performance of the Central Information Commissioner or State Information Commissioner going to be in any manner prejudiced? This is the question I ask. This is the meat of the problem. If we look at it that way, if all the powers are intact, if all the power of appointment and power of removal is still with the President of India and the committee of the PMO, then where is the question of the Central Information Commissioner trying to be dependent upon the salaries for his work? In the recent case, Mr. Yashovardhan was one of the persons who had raised certain serious objections. So in a recent interview in NDTV, I asked Mr. Yashovardhan, sir, assuming you are getting 90,000 and you are not getting the full pay, will you do less work? Will you say that no, you've given me less salary, so I'm not going to do the work that I'm going to do if you gave me 2,50,000? Well, this is a job that under the Act has to be occupied by luminaries, eminent citizens, people who have worked in social field, people who have had scientific achievements to in their life, and therefore they are not coming there for the purpose of salaries alone, and that's the misconception. Now, if we look at section 18, section 18 is the power of the Central Information Commissioner. The powers of the Central Information Commissioner, just get a glass of water. The powers of the Central Information Commissioner, the powers of the Central Information Commissioner under section 18 consists in calling for evidence, consists in calling for documents, penalizing authorities, and then asking for inspection of documents. And the power also includes the direction to direct any authority. He has the power to direct any authority. So even this is left unchanged. This is also one of the pillars of the enactment. And section 12.5 contemplates the autonomy. Section 12.5 says he is autonomous and there is nobody who can interfere with his acts and powers and functions. Even this is left untouched. So my friends, what I'd like you to consider, because this is a debate where we really consider whether by altering the salaries and allowances, the government has dislodged the entire apparatus itself. That's the sort of narrative that is being put out. I don't think so. Because when you have autonomy under 12.5 intact, when you have the removal of the CIC, whether he gets 2,50,000 salary or whether he gets 1 lakh salary as declared under the rules, he is still to be removed by the President of India and none else, and the governor for the State Information Commission. And again, when we look at his powers and functions, his power to direct seizure of documents, power to direct production of evidence, power to penalize, all these are left untouched. These are the pillars of the enactments. This is the substance of the enactment. Now, coming to the question, somehow in India we have a conception that, look here, there is salaries and emoluments equivalent to the Supreme Court judge. Now you have removed the Supreme Court and you have set the central government. Well, that was a status conferred under the old Act. Policies and times have changed. You don't have to really say that his salaries and allowances are equivalent to a Supreme Court judge to give him, to say that he has that power or not. The powers which are there already conferred in him are in a package and they are left untouched. Merely because you say the central government will decide or central government will fix the salary, can that ornamental change, this is the question I'm asking, can that ornamental change be the sole criteria to say you have destroyed the Act? I don't think so. I don't think we can ever come to that conclusion. And section 12, section 12.4 says that only the salaries and emolument, allowances, are equivalent to the Supreme Court. The status is not equivalent to the Supreme Court. For example, of course, the right to information is a constitutional right. Now, let us acknowledge that it is a constitutional right. Assuming it is a constitutional right, every constitutional right need not be decided by a constitutional office. For example, I have a right to form assembly in India under Article 19. I have a right of free expression. It's a fundamental right. All of us have. We can go, we can form an assembly, we can form an association. Nobody can regulate us, so long as it is within the rule of law. Now, or it doesn't offend public morality, it doesn't cause disturbance to the rule of law. Assuming we form such an association, the Commissioner of Bangalore comes and says, no, you can't form that association. All right, he passes an order, we test that order. He says, you can't form the assembly and form a meeting here. He passes an order, we test that order in the High Court. Now, he regulates a constitutional right, the Commissioner of Police. But that does not mean that he should be a constitutional officer. A Commissioner of Police is not a constitutional officer. So this is the way somehow a narrative is being peddled. That look here, this is a high constitutional office. This is the office where it is equivalent to the President of the Supreme Court judge. And because it is equivalent to the Supreme Court judge, you are now reducing the weight and authority. What Mr. Modi has actually done, or the central government has actually done is, it has reduced the tax burden. Look here, I am managing my house. I earn a certain salary. I am managing my house. Yes, I am managing my house. I have a certain salary, and I have to manage my house within that salary. Now, if within that salary, all right, just hear me out. If within that salary,
May I request people to keep some silence, please?
if within that salary, I am paying too much for certain people within my staff, I will try to reduce it and rationalize it. This attempt to reduce and rationalize is a sincere attempt to bring down the levels of expenditure of the government. For example, the River Tribunals Act, there were about 6 to 10 tribunals that were running. The central government has now rationalized and said, only one tribunal will decide. And it has told all the existing tribunals. This is a new amendment which has been passed. It has told all the new tribunals, you complete your work within a stated time, or please ensure that you give it to a single tribunal. This is the manner in which today the central government is functioning. The whole attempt is rationalization, reducing the burden on the pocket of the taxpayer, which is very important, always. And that is how governance is. Why should you pay so much? Why should you pay 2,80,000? Anyway, paying 2,80,000 or reducing it will not in any manner impinge or infringe or be prejudicial to the work of the Information Commissioner. And also the Information Commissioner regulates second appeals. He does not regulate the original flow of work of information. He is in the second appellate stage. And more or less these complaints are decided summarily. In a small hearing. They are decided many a time. Litigants will not be able to go before him. It is decided in a summary hearing, or it is decided by himself. Friends, in view of these facts, I would also like to point out one fact to some of my friends, or some of my friends who would love to differ. We are always a differing democracy, let me tell you. We should differ, and we should debate. Some of my friends, the thinking is, that there is a legal entitlement to salaries and offices. Gone is that era. There is no legal entitlement. We have gone with the British era. We have removed the British legacy. Take it off our minds. There is no question of legal entitlement to, or some form of a legacy to, for posts, offices, status, equivalent to Supreme Court judge. I'm equivalent to this office. I'm equivalent to president. Remove that. That is not the way the constitution works, or India should work. Democracy today has to work on a different standard. And it is good for India that you remove all these things and you just say, sir, you go ahead with your work. Now the last issue is the tenure. Many of them say that, look here, now you can decide the tenure. You can shorten the tenure. Well, the earlier act said 5 years or 65 years of age. So far as 65 years of age is concerned, that was the age of superannuation for the Information Commissioner. In this act, it only says that the rules will be framed. A rule will be framed, and the rule will uniformly be applicable to everybody. For example, if you have a 3-year tenure or a 4-year tenure fixed, it will be applicable to everybody. So there is no danger there to the institution or threat to the institution. The only point that I'd like to make, friends, is, look here, the substance and meat of the act is as it is. This is just a haircut to the excessive expenditure. And once you do the haircut, I think the institution will continue to work the way it worked originally, with the same powers conferred upon it, with the same autonomy. Jayna was talking about fear. Well, what is the fear? If I asked Yashobardhan, sir, you are a CIC. If you are earning 50,000 a month, 90,000 a month, can there be fear?
Yeah.
So therefore, thank you.
So, thank you, Vivek. What we understand is the sole purpose and reason was only cost reduction and nothing else. That's what we get out of this submission. I think we
not only that, rationalization. How much of
cost reduction. So, let's take this to Mr. Veeresh Bellur, who has formed the RTI study circle. He has got tremendous experience in actually the entire RTI framework in Karnataka state. So, sir, can you please tell us your views and responses to the various panelists who have spoken earlier?
Thank you, Revathy. And I thank my fellow panelists for highlighting about the amendment of the Act. As Mr. Vivek rightly said, the government has not touched any of the sections except the salary portion. The powers of the information commissions and commissioners remain as it is even after the amendment. That's why this amendment was proposed. We made a study on it. We collected the data from various organizations, that is various commissions, including Information Commission, Lokayukta is there, State Human Rights Commission is there, Police Complaints Authority, RERO, Women's Commission is there, a lot of commissions are there. We collected the data from all these organizations regarding the salaries being paid by the government to all these heads, chairmen and members of these commissions. The Lokayukta is getting a consolidated salary of 2.9 lakhs. Normally a person who is a High Court, either a retired High Court Chief Justice or Supreme Court judge, used to be appointed as the Lokayukta in Karnataka. But they didn't get the deserving candidates. They made an amendment, and now the present Lokayukta is as retired High Court judge. The first time in Karnataka, retired High Court judge was appointed as Lokayukta. Now, that post has been actually downgraded. There was no resistance from any of the corners. None of the citizens questioned why government you had degraded the position of the Lokayukta High Court judge. Okay, leave it alone. We made application to the State Human Rights Commission. He gets the equal salary, fixed salary of 2.9 lakh per month. That is the salary is being paid. And Police Complaints Authority the same thing. It is little less. RERA, it is equivalent to the Chief Secretary. You come into the Information Commissions are concerned, the salary payable to the Chief Information Commissioner of Karnataka is 3.5 lakhs. Much above the Supreme Court judge, High Court Chief Justice. An ordinary Information Commissioner in Karnataka, Information Commission gets a salary of 2.8 lakhs. You would see the beauty of it, how these bureaucrats manipulated at the time of framing drafting this RTI Act itself. They said the post of State Information Commissioner, he holds the equivalent rank of the Chief Secretary. Chief Secretary is not paid the fixed salary. He has got a time scale.
No.
Is it?
No.
No. It is a time scale.
No, it's flat.
Yes, but it is a DA linked salary. Yes, is it? Will you agree with it?
No, I don't agree.
No.
Anyway, carry on. I'll come to
Yes. We have the data here. Salary of the Chief Secretary is DA linked. Every 6 months, when there is a increase in DA, he will get that benefit. That is the. So, yes, is it, sir? Will you agree? Yes. But nowhere in the commissions this DA linked salary is there, only the fixed salary is there. So, State Information Commissioner, I will come to the perks of it. State Information Commissioner, every month he will get a sumptuary allowance of 5,000 rupees. 20,000 rupees salary for the allowance of a attendant at his residence. HRA he will get 40,000. fully furnished house you will get it. Medical reimbursement facility is there. They have got the special health. Now, this is given, this is uniform in all the states. But in Karnataka, in State Information Commissioners, they made a representation of the government. We are holding the rank of Chief Secretary here. Chief Secretary gets pension of retirement. The same retirement benefit should also be extended to the Information Commissioners of the Karnataka Information Commission. They made a representation. So Mr. Suresh Kumar was the law minister at that time. They met him, they brought some pressure on him. A pension scheme was formed for these State Information Commissioners in Karnataka. How this is fixed? As if they are retiring as Chief Secretary after 30 years of service. Now a retired Information Commissioner in Karnataka is getting a pension of 75,000 rupees even after completion of 30 months of service, as if they have retired. Nowhere in India this scheme has been given to any of the Information Commissioners. This is a unique thing was given. Now it is under challenge before the High Court of Karnataka. These Information Commissioners, other information companies, they took out this Karnataka model and placed a similar demand in the respective states, and even the Central Information Commissioner also made a request with this DOP. Finally, DOPT said, you are not an employee appointed as on salary basis, it's a consolidated salary, and you are not entitled for the retirement benefits. Central Information Commission, this pension was denied to the Central Information Commissioner. In turn, the DOPT central government wrote to the state government to withdraw this illegal sanctioned pension. Even the Chief Information Commissioner wrote a letter. Government did not accept it. In the vice versa, in the alternative, other state information commissioners started demanding pension scheme for in their states and here. They formed an association of these information commissioners. Have you ever seen information in Lokayuktas forming association for fighting for rights for their salaries and all? This is now, the government thought it's a very dangerous trend here. They could not stop it here. How to stop it here? Then they thought of bringing an amendment to standardize the salaries, giving them the fixed salary, not the de-limited salary. This is what the government has taken a decision. Several times they wrote to the state government did not accept it. Then we filed a writ in the High Court challenging the sanctioning of pension to the State Information Commissioners. This is the reason. And do you know, they are getting the LTC benefits they are getting. No commissioner, no other commissioners, LTC benefit is being given to them here. This is how, what is happening here. This is the reason why it has come back. Now I will tell you, in Karnataka information, a commissioner gets a now, including DA, gets a salary of about 2.5 lakhs per month. Every day they take up only 10 cases, they will hear the cases. Morning time they will hear the cases, and afternoon they are not available in the commission itself here. So on an average, about 400 to 500 cases will be disposed of in a year by each commission. We have made the cost analysis of it here. In 2014-15, the cost of disposal of each case was 11,000 rupees, but now it has reached 26,000 rupees. The cost is drastically increasing, and there is no accountability at all for the information commissioners. I will come to this point in the latest, in the next round of talks. I will come to the other, how Karnataka Information Commission is functioning. Sir, I am a citizen of this country. I am not a legal expert on this. I have been using the RTI extensively, appearing before the commission regularly. This is how I am very well aware how these information commissions are functioning. Then coming to the one amendment proposed regarding the age of the changing the tenure and age of the appointment of the information commissioners, chief information commissioner. I would like to draw your kind attention to the one famous case, that is Nabit Sharma versus Union of India. She challenged the appointment of Chief Information Commissioners and Information Commissioners in the Supreme Court of India. After a long deliberation, arguments and all, Supreme Court issued an order on September 2012. I would like to read out the important paras and it's here. The Information Commission at the respective level shall henceforth work in benches of 2 members each. The Supreme Court said these Information Commissioners were sitting, even today they are sitting single bench. Yes, they are issuing orders. The Supreme Court said you cannot sit in a single bench. Always you should hear cases in the bench here. And here, one of them being a judicial member while the other an expert member. This is the practice adopted in all the commissions. Knowing the commission, either it is a Human Rights Commission or a Women's Commission, cases will be decided with the benches, but whereas in Information Commission it will be decided by single bench here. This order says, a law of then, we are of the considered view that the competent authority should prefer a person who is or has been a judge of the High Court for appointment as Information Commissioners. Chief Information Commissioner at the center or state level shall only be a person who is or has been a Chief Justice of the High Court or a Judge of the Supreme Court. This is the Namit Sharma case the Supreme Court has clearly given an order. So now, as per this, if the order is implemented, now the government has gone and brought a stay on that review petition still pending.
So let me just clarify that point. In 2013, Supreme Court basically, it's not in 2013, the Supreme Court pretty much recalled these directions. They said we won't tamper with the way in which the Information Commission is working, and you're free, and the Parliament is free to amend if it feels fit. But they basically withdrew this direction or consideration, saying there should be a judicial member or there should be a retired Supreme Court judge who should head the Information Commission. The fundamental mistake they realized that they made was treating the Information Commission as a tribunal. It's not a tribunal. It's a forum for grievance redressal. And this may seem like a trivial difference, but it is not. The Information Commission is sort of addressing a grievance that you may have with the government. A tribunal decides questions of law and fact. So, for example, the income tax appellate tribunal also involves you demanding accountability from the government, also demands you raising questions, but they're deciding questions of law and fact. Because you're represented by a lawyer, you're represented by a CA, you need a certain level of expert knowledge to handle the IT. Whereas CIC by design was meant to be for everyone. It was meant to be that any person, like Mr. Bellur just pointed out, as a non-lawyer, he also, the fact that he can go there and make his presentation, have himself heard and pass effective orders, was exactly what the Information Commission was supposed to be. And to turn it into a tribunal means to end up helping the rest of us on this panel, but not the cause of the Information Commission. So the Supreme Court modified these directions to say, when there are issues of law, one person who has an understanding of law can decide this case. So in 2013, they passed this direction to say that when there is any substantial issue of law, let the Chief Information Commissioner place it before that particular member who has an understanding of law. But beyond that, they understood that the direction which Mr. Bellur just mentioned is not the right way to think of the Information Commission. So that's just one clarification.
But anyhow, this order, government went on a review petition that is still before the Supreme Court of India. Now, suppose, as per this, if this direction is implemented, a judge, retired judge, Supreme Court judge is required to be appointed as a State Chief Information Commission or an Information Commission at the center. Now there is a bar on appointing a person who has completed 65 years of service. Supreme Court judges retire at the age of 65 years. So if this amendment is not done, you can never appoint a Supreme Court judge or a High Court Chief Justice as an Information Commissioner. They will be totally barred from being appointed as the Information Commissioner or a Chief Information Commissioner because of the age factor. Now, the government, the larger thinking is, how to accommodate these retired judges in case if they want to accommodate. What should be the option? The only option left before the government is to amend this age factor. No, this amendment is that one thing. I am also an activist working with the NCPRI and a lot of the organizations. With great difficulty we got this done here. Some of the activists, they have taken a very rigid stand that no amendment should be allowed to this constitution. Law cannot be stagnant. We should be open to the changes here. We made an argument even in the social conferences. Personally, I made an argument before them. We should be open to the amendments. We need lot of amendments because lot of changes have taken place in the law here. For example, I'll sum it up that one. What is the amendment? What is proposed has been done. Will not alter any of the structure of the law itself here. It is not against the interest of the people. That is my opinion.
So Jayna, would you like to respond?
Yeah, can I respond, please?
Yes.
One is that the 2012 decision that
Namish
Sharma, I'd like to clarify, it's not pending. There's a 2013 decision, so there is no threat or any inkling that commissioners could be Supreme Court judges or High Court judges. The court has ruled against it. And there's a 2013 decision following your decision, what you mentioned. The government went in review, and the review was allowed, and then the court held that Supreme Court judges or High Court judges are not required to be the commissioners because this is not it's not a judicial function. So I really want to kind of respond to some of these comments or views only because the idea that the age tenure was removed so that to make a retired judge, that is absolutely not the case. The court is held against it. Now the age tenure Vivek also raised the issue and both of them. Are these ornamental changes? If they're merely ornamental changes, will not affect the working of the Act. These are merely pay cuts, And I think in these pay cuts, we kind of put the tenure guarantee under the carpet. We brush that under the carpet. And I'd like to ask myself or ask any of the other panelists that if pay cut was such a big issue, then what about the Niti Aayog? Why aren't you doing pay cuts there? And the whole issue is really about tenure. The CIC has and the State Information Commissioners have important roles and functions under the Act. They are appellate authorities. So where cases or applications for information go up all the way to the State and Chief Information Commissioners, they are the appellate authorities. And if there is no fixed tenure, today the rules haven't come yet, and we don't know what the rules will be. But if the fixed tenure of 5 years is replaced by, as decided by the government, by the central government, the central government can decide what the tenure will be. If there is a very small tenure fixed, or today even, the fact that this amendment is made, I think it is just to someone outside, it may seem like a very procedural or, just a cosmetic amendment that, just the pay scales and tenure is changed. It's really not about the pay scales, but it is, the heart of it is the tenure, right? Because if there is no guarantee of tenure, how are we going to ensure that Chief Information Commissioners and State Information Commissioners are going to carry out their duties in deciding cases of requests for information, cases which come up on appeal? Not only that, they have monitoring duties, and they also have, any person, if their requests are refused, they can go up to the CIC and the State Information Commission. How do we ensure? There is a direct threat to their functioning, because you know that if my tenure is based on the government's pleasure, right? So that, I think, is where, the intrusion to the core of the Act is there. All your other functions are not touched, but your role and tenure is touched, right? And that is of the topmost authority. It's not of the lower public information officer, but it's of the topmost authority. And what kind of cases go in second appeal? either where the applicant is ready to push it, or where it is really, where it is not addressed at the lower level. The most contentious cases go up to the Chief Information Commissioner and the State Information. And in those cases, if tenure is tweaked to say it's not 5 years, but it is as per the central government, then I think that will go to the root of.
So, Jayna, we have to really wait for the rules, because I'm sure they're not going to have a situation where it will be decided on a case-to-case basis. I'm really hopeful that they will have rules that are uniform across, so we have a reference point. But having said that, I want to ask Vivek, was cost reduction the only reason why something was done? And if so, why did we do it without consultation and just putting it out in public domain that this is a cost reduction exercise? The whole country would have said, yeah, this is great and we will save so many crores. So why was that not done?
Well, I think there has been a lot of anxiety ratcheted up on that. And yes, sorry, I'll restart. I think first of all, there was a concern, definitely a concern, as Mr. Bellur said, of the huge amounts of pay that was being brought by the commissioners. There was a concern. Hold on, let me just complete. And this had gone to a stage where, as Mr. Bellur said, a rampant stage where the commissioners had formed associations and they were fighting for the retired pensions and salaries. This is one.
Even family pension,
family pension. A family pension. And usually commissioners were retired chief secretaries. I have argued before some commissioners, state information commissioners. They get their own pension and salary there, and they are also asking for further pension here for this tenure. And it is really, it is really sad and unfortunate. We are pained when positions of this status, positions of this importance, where some form of service is also expected by the Information Commissioner, is reduced or has spiraled down to a stage where they start fighting for emoluments, pensions, allowances. I don't think that was the intent of the Act. Certainly that was not the intent of the Act. So there was a necessity to take this at a certain level. And the central government also has to bear in mind that the purse strings are to be opened, when the purse strings are to be opened, when the purse strings are to be controlled. And that is also important. You have to have that fiscal tightness in order to ensure that you govern properly. This is one. Second thing, Revathy, what Jayna brought up, I think Jayna basically accepts that, all right, forget the salaries part, you rationalize salaries, but why the tenure? Now, she has brought out some important points which require clarification. One is, whenever Parliament, the absolute conferrer of power under our Constitution, if we understand the scheme, the absolute conferrer of power is the Parliament. The Parliament confers power by a legislation to various bodies. That is how the Constitution envisages legislation. Now, when these powers are conferred upon various bodies, it divides these powers and enjoins certain accountability upon the functionaries which exercise the power. Now, so far as salaries and tenure are concerned, the Parliament question always arises, did the Parliament give this power to one authority, let us say the central government, and has it told the central government to do whatever it wants? Then there is arbitrary conference of power. There is arbitrary anointing of power, which is prohibited under the Constitution. Our Constitution under Article 14 says that you cannot confer power, unlimited power, unbridled power. Now that's why what they do, the Parliament has said, look here, we are going to give you the power of salaries and tenure, but this is going to be controlled by the rules. Why? Because of what Revathy pointed out. It can't be fixed on a case-to-case basis. It has to be fixed uniformly. Therefore, the conference of power is regulated. There was a case in 1881 called Queen versus Burra, where they said that repressive provisions of a certain enactment under the British could be brought on against the hill areas, because the hill areas like Jayna Hills and other hills were very difficult to be controlled by the British. So they said you could exercise military powers there, and they gave arbitrary powers. This went up to the Privy Council. The Privy Council said this is conference of arbitrary power, it cannot be accepted. So therefore power here is regulated. It will be, whatever the central government decides will equally apply to John, Henry, or whoever is the state election commissioner, to Prakash or Raj, whoever is the state election commissioner or central election commissioner. So therefore, it is a constitutional standard which the parliament has adopted here. It is perfectly constitutional in order to reduce the salaries, bring in rationalization, make the purse strings safer. So therefore, we are on constitutional grounds.
With that, Alok, two critical points. One is, it's looks like the purpose or stated purpose is cost reduction and rationalization, and it does not seek to impede on any way the constitutional authority which is vested, albeit in an indirect way through the freedom of expression, etc. Would you like to comment on
So
this?
let me just make 2 quick points here. One is, I think if again I go by, let's take the scenario which Jayna pointed out. If the government tries to cut short a tenure, supposing there's a tenure of 5 years and they want to punish a CIC by cutting short their tenure to 3 years, that will go directly against the existing provisions of the Act. So I don't think this rule-making power extends to cutting short someone's tenure to remove them, because I think it's when what you can't do directly, you can't do indirectly. That's well-established principle of law. So I would say I am not so much concerned about that. But my real concern about this one, I think what this debate has sort of shown up is, why haven't these points made come through in the statement of objects and reasons or the speeches in Parliament? I tried to read the Minister of State's speech when he introduced the bill and tried to answer questions. I actually did not understand what he was trying to say. I mean, I understand the gentleman is not a lawyer. I don't expect him to give legal arguments, but these are public policy concerns. And I don't dispute that this is a valid concern. I mean, if I want to make a little bit of a very archaic joke, most service law questions become constitutional questions, but now I'm realizing that a constitutional question can become a service law question. But I mean, I don't dispute that these are concerns, right? And yes, if there are issues of basically people taking up posts because it involves a nice fat paycheck, let's have that debate in the public forum. This was a law which was passed with enormous widespread consultation. If I'm not mistaken, it was passed unanimously in 2005. Today, if you want to make changes, I don't see why the government should not trust the people to say, look, this is the problem. Yes, there will be people who will say, no, this is not a real problem, we disagree with you. But I think I would like the government to be able to trust the population to say, these are the real reasons. I mean, if Mr. Vivek Reddy had probably offered these reasons, I think 90% of the discussion would have been much more focused and much more precise. Today, I do agree that there is a lot of concerns being raised which are frankly overblown. This might give people the impression that please stop filing RTI. I think that's the worst possible outcome. It's fine to have a social media campaign that says kill RTI debt and so on and so forth. But the act is still alive, it can still be used. There is still so much scope for pushing back, still so much scope for finding out. But I do feel that this belief that people can't be trusted with the real reasons, or that people may not understand the trust reasons, that is what bothers me about this process. The fact that it was just ramrodded through in both the Houses of Parliament, I think that tells us something much more deeply problematic in the way in which our institutions are working. And to me, the text of the law, it may be, as lawyers we always have disagreements on the impact, but to me this is whatever we decide on the text of the law, the process to me is a much bigger problem.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. I think we've got some very interesting insights beyond what we have read and what the general public has understood. I think we'll now open it out to questions. Maybe one last question before this. When we were making this amendment, the RTI Act has been there for 15 years. There have been cases of excesses, there have been problems also. We are active users of RTI, we know how difficult it is to get information out. Therefore, was there this opportunity in terms of looking at things more comprehensively and plugging 2 or 3 more big issues which are there? And if so, is it too late to do something like that? Because it's been in operation for 3 years. And of course, Mr. Veeresh Bellur telling us about the background to it. If that background had been there, why was it not put out in the statement? So these would be some of the key questions, and then we will let them answer that. Then we will open it out to questions. Anybody would like to take this?
Yeah, madam. We have made a study of the functioning of the information commissions across the country. We have got a very good network, and the feedback on the basis of the feedback, what we received from various states, we have pointed out 15 points. But actually, the amendment is not killing the law. And in fact, information commissioners, they themselves are killing the act. We have pointed out 15 important points. The very first point is, they are enjoying the immunity. Nobody can dismiss them from the service. Once they assume the charge, they can safely retire without any impeachments or without any inquiry or without discussion. Absolute immunity they are enjoying. So that is the way they are very safe. The first is, this is our experience in the Karnataka information. We have got some of the activists have come with me, Mr. Ramu Senior and all. Every day we attend the court. We take up the advocacy court, we attend the cases. The very first point is, the courts opens at 10:30 here. They stop the hearings at 11 o'clock exactly here. But in information commissioners, they come at their will and go at their will. There is no fixed times for them. Some of them come by 11:30. Some of them go early in the evening, afternoon, 3 o'clock. They never come up to the office at all here. So, not maintaining punctuality, late coming and early going. This is what they are doing here. Hearing of selected cases by ignoring seniority. No seniority is being maintained for preparing the cause list here. The cause list is being prepared at the whims and fancies of the information commissioners. Hearing of 10 to 20 cases per day in lieu of hearing 40 to 50 cases. We made a demand with the Information Commission and they accepted it earlier. They used to hear 40 cases, 20 fresh cases and 20 urgent cases in the afternoon. Now, some of the commissioners are hearing only 10 cases, either in the morning or in the afternoon, coming to at their will end. There is no uniformity in number of hearing, number of cases here. Disposing of cases without proper hearing. Suppose if the petitioner, the appellant is not present, they used to dismiss the case without citing the reason that the applicant is not interested in hearing it. That earlier, the commissioner used to hear the cases even in absence of the petitioner here. So, these are some of the crucial issues are there. The way in which the information commissioners are behaving is not in the interest. The way they are being appointed, deserving persons are not being appointed as information commissioner. That is one of the reasons. Caste and the money is the main, money power is the main criteria in selection of the information commission.
Anyway, the amendment anyway will not resolve any of these issues, and we thank you for pointing out the issues. We'll now open this out for questions. Please stand up, identify yourself, and we'll try to get as many as possible.
Please wait for the mic, otherwise the recording won't happen.
But please be brief, because we have many questions. I can see many hands going up. Sir?
Thank you. My name is P.R. Dasgupta. I first of all thank all the panelists for a brilliant discussion. We are much enlightened. Two brief issues. One is that I think all the panelists agree that there is a considerable amount of public opinion which is also opposed to the amendments. Would it not have been better if this had been referred to select committees where we normally know party considerations or party views really do not work, and people really discuss in a non-partisan manner. Probably that should have been better. And also, I think even now, since there is a lot of activism on this field, I suppose it will have to, now the bill has been passed by both the houses, it will go to the President of India. Now, technically, I suppose, it is still open for the President of India to refer it back to the government for a reconsideration. President has got that right. Maybe that is one way of looking at it. And we are absolutely delighted that the government has decided to do the rationalization of the terms in terms of cost, etc. But charity must begin at home. Should it not begin with the Parliament? Subsidized bodies. I mean, I don't go into the trivialities like a canteen which is supposed to be the Parliament House canteen. I have had occasion to be a part of that as an official. Probably nowhere in India you can get 5-star food at a very, very comfortable Janta cost. But that is apart. There are several rights and privileges which the members of Parliament confer on themselves, which they should take care, and they should start rationalizing there. There are other bodies, National Green Tribunal, National Human Rights Commission. Ms. Jayna has already referred to some of them. I suggest that let the government consider all these facts and take a rational view in the same way they are trying to rationalize the council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm Sanjeev. As Mr. Reddy pointed out, the cost reduction or whatever. Cost reduction. So look at the 15 years we have down the line we are coming. We have experienced a lot of turbulence and gaps in the RTI Act. What is that? The 500 plus 500 MPs, 1000 MPs made an attempt to improve and strengthen the RTI Act. 15 years is a good learning for this thing. Not even one amendment has come out in this thing. What is this 500 plus 500 parliaments are doing? Second question is, when you are saying cost of this reduction, except central government has an online application which I can file at 10 rupees sitting at my home at night, 10 o'clock. Look at the people who are at the remote places. How can they file a RTI online for the state government? Where is the mandate that it is online has to be filed? In central government, there is a mandate all the departments have to be RTI online file. Then there is a first appeal you can file online without any cost. Look at manually filing a RTI by the village people at some remote places. 10 rupees he has to go to post office, collect the postal order, send it by post, and then 10 rupees. Then the person who receives the receipt is not bothered to even reply. This is where I was looking at it. If RTI Act would have been made it a mandatory that online RTI filing is this thing.
Thanks.
If I just may respond to one point there, and just very quick point. To me, the most important part of the RTI Act is actually not even the power to make application and seek information or appeal. To me, the most important part is in fact Section 4, which makes it mandatory for the government to keep records and make them public. Unfortunately, the implementation of this, nobody has kept track. And something very funny or sad, somebody who tried to do a study on state information commissions, what Mr. Bellur did for Karnataka, they did for every single state information commission across the country. The RTIs were rejected by the state information commissions in so many cases. And that is the sad irony of it. So I completely agree that, look, this is, like so many flaws are there that in the manner of functioning, and just implement Section 4. RTI Commission, the Central Information Commission would come in only for the most exceptional cases. Unfortunately, it's being used in almost everything.
If I can answer what he said. I think so far as the second question is concerned, it's good that you pointed out that online applications were not available in the Karnataka information system. So we will, because now we have a government. If you can just coordinate with me, let us put through the rules and try to enforce it.
That will be a great outcome. Thank you, Vivek. With that, we will move to the next. Yes.
Sir, my name is Sir, one minute, sir. This online application is concerned. They have made a provision now only on the experimental basis. They have done it. As soon the present Chief Information Commissioner assuming the charge, he is not interested in implementing the scheme itself here. It is kept in abeyance here. We have been demanding for the last 1 year for online application form as well as for the first appellate.
So if he doesn't do it, Jayna and me will be there ready to file a pro bono PI because they have to do it.
Thank you, Vivek.
Okay, sir.
My name is Anand Arni. I would like to contest the point that you're reducing this thing to say reducing these wages just to cut your pare down your expenses. I did a back of the envelope calculation and I put all your various information commissioners. You probably are not spending more than 10 crores a year, of which 50% is not really to be spent because most of the people who come across are coming with their pensions. And you're wrong in that the pensions are not added. The pensions are deducted from the salaries. So most people who come as information commissioners are secretaries to Government of India. They're already drawing 2.5, of which pension is 1.25. So you're not giving them any great favor by increasing by 2.8.
That's a good point, Vivek.
That's a point. And then what are you going to pay? 1 crore at best, not more than that. Just about not more. It's not worth it.
Well,
Sir, the published annual report of the Karnataka Information Commission we have got, only up to 14-15 they have done it. 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, even today, till today they have done it. 14, 15 figures I have got here. 4.5 crores has been spent for the Karnataka Information Commission. Out of the 2.8 crore was the salary it has been paid here. In Karnataka, okay, the retired bureaucrats, they get the pension and okay, it offsets. But now we have appointed a person who is a dentist, who never made the RTI application, has been appointed as a information commissioner. Now he is 42. At the age of the retire, 47, he retires and draws a pension of 75,000 as if he has served 30 years as an IAS officer and retired as a chief secretary of India.
if I can add to that, Mr. Anand, if I can add to
justify
good insight you brought.
So anyway, this amendment doesn't address any of those.
Yes, no.
That is the real issue.
One short point, which I'd like to add to Anand. Ultimately, when you look at the cost impacts, of course, you made a very good point. You'd say for a central government, 10 crores is not much. The budget is much more than 10 crore. All right, let's deal with it. It's a disputed fact. But what Mr. Bellur said assumes significance. Because if we are going to escalate the cost from 11,000 per application to 26,000 per application, the statistics that he gave out, I think we better not be doing that, spending so much. That's the point I'm making. We need to reduce the cost per application. And that's where, we get the exact benefits to make it more meaningful.
I think there would be, there may be some other points, because if you are saying escalation over a period of 15 years, I think we have to have a different calculation there. There are other ways to make it, more technology friendly, to reduce cost, etc., etc. Those would be much more welcome.
Sir, I have two points. One is to Mr. Vivek. My name is Reddy.
Yes.
So, one is the cart can't be before the horse. So, people should publish the rule when they want to scrap or change the amendment. In our haste to remove archaic.
That's the question?
Yeah, that I think is.
That's the single question?
Yes. No.
Yes.
One more.
Quick, because there are many others.
Cost of living in Mumbai and Trivandrum and Bhubaneswar will be different. So, single law won't work. So, that is something that needs to be considered. I think the greater appeal that people are having is we should not even need RTI, we should have a public disclosure law that we don't even need to file any RTI, all information should be available even as it is framed. I think we should have that vision so that we don't need to be haggling about all this.
Yes, okay. Now, regarding the question that why don't the rules published, It is always upon the...
Judges should be appointed.
Yes, sir.
Not required.
One second.
Head of the
Please.
department is got
Please.
enough powers.
Yes.
They
This is
can-
why the
Many
information...
of the people, they will come, retired people, they will
Sir,
continue work. for
Correct,
this.
correct. They will just sit on the job doing nothing.
Only the politicians,
Sir, with due respect,
they want to make all this. things.
Pradeep's query about the rules. It is always when the bill becomes a law that the central government starts working on the rules. The rules can't be published by the parliament because parliament does not do every other administrative act. It devolves that function to the central government and central government passes the rules. It will have one control in some enactments. I don't know whether it is there in RTI. It will say that the rules must be placed before the parliament so that they exercise an added control over the central government. I don't know whether that is there.
No, that's there.
Head of the department comes, head of the-
Please. Next question.
Good evening, everyone. I am Aman Sinha. I am a lawyer and currently an in-house counsel with Bosch India. And I am a public-spirited person. So my question is, although even I also agree that the amendments, they are guides to reduce the powers of the Central Information Commission and State Information Commissioners. But I have one question to everyone who says that the amendment is unconstitutional. Most likely it has to be unconstitutional on the ground of Article 14, that is right to equality. Now, right to equality in the present era can be violated if the amendment itself is either not following the test of classification, that is, it is an unreasonable classification, or if intelligible differential is not being applied. In this particular case, because the election commission is a constitutional body and Central Information Commission is a statutory body. Therefore, a differential being applied in both of them is definitely valid. So I fail to understand as a lawyer that where is the unconstitutionality coming, and I would hope that amongst the
doctrine is a beautiful point that you pointed out. The doctrine is don't treat unequals as equals. Don't try to bring a information commission on par with the constitutional body and say their pays should be rationalized. You cannot treat them as equals. And salaries and pays as such of a statutory body are not part of the right to equality. It's a statutory right. It's not a constitutional right.
No, please. We need to give. Yes.
My name is Vijay. I have no pity or heart for CICs and ICs and the way it's been said earlier. And if you can cut the salary by 500%, I would agree with them because they really don't do their job. But I'm confused about one thing. That the fear is that this amendment gives a greater control of government over these great luminaries and therefore will control what they want. So that's and then there's a separate discussion which has said, no, it does not happen because the pillars are already there.
Yes.
However, if I twist the question in a different way, for just time being, suppose the government wants to make these guys work, actually do some work instead of taking only 5 or 10 things and actually contributing to the information era. Can they do that by this act either? Amendment? If they can influence in a bad way, will the amendment also can they influence in a good way?
So let me just one very quick preliminary point. So I would say that influence, as you say, in itself is a bad thing. It's not about whether it results in good outcomes or bad outcomes. If the government is controlling the CIC, that itself is a problem. Like, in a sense, if tomorrow the government would call up a High Court judge and say, decide a case like this, even if that case is in great public interest, I think that's the worst thing possible. Even if everybody is benefited by it, I think it's the worst thing.
No.
My point is, we can't take a consequentialist approach to
this. Either way it can happen, right? And
yeah.
it can happen today also.
Mr. Vijay Menon, the issue is this. It's a good point that you make out. The issue is this. If the appointment process emerges out of a committee, as was originally envisaged by the Parliament, a committee of PMO and the leader of opposition, and the committee appoints, then we can expect that the original version is left untouched. So the appointment process as to who comes there is left untouched. So the influence of the government to that extent is as it was originally. There is no influence of the government. This is one. The second issue is, a good point that you made is, will this amendment make them perform better? Well, I think it depends upon each individual. We have very good information commissioners who work on the basis of their own mindset and attitude, and we have got very lethargic ones also, as you pointed out. So it depends on the individual person as to how.
So the short answer really is the amendment really does not address the issues that you have raised, Vijay.
No, but in fact, the question that will it make them work better, and I would argue the other way around. It would not make them work better if the tenure is reduced from say 5 years to 2 years under whatever rules. Which Chief Information Commissioner would be interested to do it?
But they don't have the rules as yet.
We can't debate on that.
But the point is, yes, we don't know the rules, but if 5 years, there was a fixed tenure of 5 years, and if it is to be changed, we all have to look at various different scenarios as to what the scenarios would be, and we have to be alive to the fact that it could be reduced.
Yeah. No. So I think in the interest of time, I'm being told that last 2 questions, and please keep it very brief, and Vivek has to leave as well for
I just
a
have
TV show.
Mr. Bhatt.
Yes, yes, the gentleman there. Yes.
Good evening, I'm Simon, I'm a first year law student at Christ. So my question is simple. It's pretty much evident that the central government is taking the responsibility of framing the rules. So it's open for all. So what would you be ideally expecting from these rules?
We really don't know, honestly. We really don't know what would be the outcome of the rules, but certainly it would be a balance. There would be a safety of tenure and salaries and perks which are quite good, not very high. But one thing is, one question to answer Mr. Vijay Menon very shortly. Are we in the era? We need to also ask ourselves: are we in the era? We sit in the position, in the shoes of the Information Commissioner and say, if you are going to give me 2.5 lakhs, I'll work in one way. If you are going to give me lesser, I'll work in a lesser way. We are not in that.
So we've had this. We close with this. I'm sorry, the organizers are saying Ravi has put the axe. Last question is over. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad that you have a civilized debate on a very, very important issue. And let's hope we are able to bring more such conversations so we all go back more informed. And if you want, there are others out here. You can